Absolutely. I think there are two levels of connection. First, it's at the basic self-connection level, right, where people still buy two different tickets and they connect themselves. The other thing was what we call a fly-through service, right, where you can buy the combined two sectors together. Physically, you go through a transfer desk, avoiding the whole immigration and customs clearance, and have your bags being transferred through. That has definitely been very popular, especially with our long-haul flights, connecting either to an onward long-haul flight or even a short-haul flight. With the current low-cost terminal in Kuala Lumpur, it was a tiny experiment, right? So we had 4 transfer desks, and sometimes when you have, two fully loaded A330s, that can create a bit of a queue. But that just goes to show the big demand that's been created from this transfer product. So we're keenly and desperately waiting for the permanent new KLIA2 terminal to be built, where there'll be a much bigger concourse for the mixing of arriving and departing passengers and proper transfer facilities to make that work. But that's clearly been, I think, very critical at one level. So the hub, firstly, has to be, has to accommodate that. As far as the sort of airports that we fly to, so far it's only been the self-connecting model. Basically for us, what we've learned, certainly with the long-haul model with a wide-body plane, is that volume trumps over everything, right? You've got to fill up the plane. So, we've had offers from smaller airports, essentially saying, look, we're flying here for free. As good as that may be, it's much more critical to go into an airport which gives a big catchment, both in terms of the markets that it serves directly as well as the connections. And one classic example of that is Haneda. Haneda in Tokyo is probably one of the most expensive airports, right? And we were given a choice of another new airport that was being developed in Tokyo, which we declined because, ultimately, when you look at the high cost of the airport part, it may only be about $20 to $30 per passenger, right? And so when you think about the additional taxi or transport money that someone has to go, it may still be worthwhile. And the related factor to that is cargo. For a wide-body operations, you want to make sure that your belly space is very well utilized. In fact, pretty much the revenues we get from cargo represents the profits of an entire route, right? So if you don't have cargo, it doesn't work. And so if you go to a small airport which doesn't have a lot of cargo, that's a big disadvantage, right? So that's why in choosing airports for us, it's an airport that can represent a big catchment. And of course, serving big cities is key, but also ones where you've got domestic and regional flights. Again, as in the case of Haneda or Stansted and Gatwick that we've flown, or even here, Sydney, Melbourne have a lot of the domestic low-cost services providing connections, to Adelaide, to Tasmania, and so forth.
So looking at your home base in Kuala Lumpur, for example, presumably one of the criteria is to have relatively high frequency connections into AirAsia.
Absolutely. So
that you don't have to self-connect works pretty well because you can miss a flight and
that's right.
Another one in 3 or 4 hours.
Yep, exactly. And I think that has been a big advantage with AirAsia having now 12 flights a day to Singapore, 7 flights a day to Bangkok, 5 flights a day to Bali, 10 flights a day to Langkawi and Kuala Kinabalu and so forth. And that frequency is absolutely critical, you're right. It's been a painful and slow evolution. A lot of things we would have preferred it being done, but there are a lot of constraints with systems. But certainly the first one has been the fly-through product, right, where you can now go on the site and choose Sydney as your origin and have a list of destinations instead of just Kuala Lumpur, even though the flight only flies into KL, right? But you can buy, Sydney Phuket, Sydney Bangkok, so forth, and purchasing the seats. I think what we need to do next in terms of evolution is to be smarter about the revenue pricing side of it, because it's very rudimentary sum of parts, right? And we've seen how the legacy full service model basically uses an O&D type pricing model, which sometimes may mean that if we're not on sale, the connecting flights, may not be competitive, right? Because you've got other airlines that are pricing very weirdly, where the sum of parts is almost double what they're charging for their O&D fare. So that may be something that we, I would say, is the next level of evolution we have to get into.
But for the time being, the default connecting fare is actually the lowest fare available in that.
It's the lowest fare available, but it's just a simple addition.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds like a big jump to make.
Absolutely.
In terms of revenue management.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have to, because what you don't want to miss out on is the true incremental business. And again, with a wide body, right? Even a 10%, getting to a 90% load, you're leaving almost 40 seats that's unoccupied, right? So every seat counts at $120 fuel.
Well, that's an issue of system development. How
Sure.
far away are we from getting something that works like that?
I'd rather prefer not to make predictions on IT development. If I had hair, I'd lose it all over again. Not fast enough for me.
Yeah.
Right now, it hasn't been. I think we remain interested in it, because the premise that the GDSs are able to access segments that are higher yield customers. Of course, we would be interested, but we've got to figure out how that works well. And I don't think there's been a successful model to integrate with a traditional LCC booking engine, especially with all the ancillary items, right, fitting it with the traditional system. I think Amadeus are committed to working and building on the simple platform that they have to save us. But for the moment, it's only a few percentage points of our sales, so it's not a big contributor yet. Well, the basic fare is straightforward. The problems happen when, imagine if you're a high yield passenger, naturally as a travel agent you want to make sure that the bags are included, the meals are included, the selection of seats and all of that, right? And that's where some of the problems arise. Absolutely. One of the few things that we've done is, it may be basic, right, but it took a while to get to that 7-day display, right? And this was an issue for us. I mean, if we were flying, 4 times a week to Chengdu, right, if you chose a day that didn't have a flight, then it would just say, sorry, no flight, and that's a big turnoff, right? So now to be able to display the whole 7 days and see is very quickly how, if you choose one day, it might be, let's say $500, but the next day may only be $300, right? So that gives customers at least a chance to find some of the lower fares. So I think that's been one that I've been excited about. Well, firstly for me, it's being, very clear with expectations up front. And ultimately, what's very important is you've got to have a legal agreement in place. It's almost shocking that, as a major customer of Malaysia airports, we don't have, a clear agreement that spells out whether it's in terms of airport fees in the future, so that we can all agree on it and not get surprised by sudden price hikes or even service levels, right? And a lot of airports that we now fly to, we have contracts in place, even though we're a small player to the airport. And that's important, because then everyone's clear about expectations, what level of services, what's going to be there, because otherwise discussions go back and forth, and that's usually where the problems happen. I think that the main thing is, and again, it's almost similar to a traditional major airport, whether it's Hong Kong or Singapore or Kuala Lumpur. It's having that interface where the arriving and departing passengers can mix. Number one, I'm sure there's tremendous retail benefits to that, right? But it also creates, basically a more comfortable space. Because otherwise, right now, if you're just funneling everyone straight through immigration, there are peak times and there will be long lines, and if people can't just spread out first, it's difficult. So I think that's key, even in the low-cost model. I'm optimistic, Peter, and the reason why I say that is because ultimately you have to go back to the first principle of what does the consumer want. If it's something that there is real demand for, solutions will arise to address them, right? And I think at a basic level, we've demonstrated that the whole connection model, there's a lot of demand for that, because there are always places where you can't get a true point-to-point service. You need to get through it through a transit point, and there are a lot of options, right? And I think the fact that consumers, number one, are becoming smarter online, more comfortable online, and number two, wanting to go to a lot more places. So inevitably, you need to have solutions that can get you, what are the best available options across different airlines. Now, as airlines, we're always uncomfortable about, having, the sales being outsourced, if you will, to another platform, because we want the brand, the website, the storefront to remain, so that we can have a direct relationship with our customers. But that doesn't stop, tools and technologies like meta search engines that help consumers find, what are the best options, and then they can go back to the individual sites to, execute the transactions. So there's a lot more I think we can do to make it easier. We just need to go back and understand what exactly is it that consumers really want.
So you don't see the online travel agent as being an active player in this process? Not if you can help it anyway.
Well, look, as you know, we've got the investment with Expedia, so I think we've come a long way to its recognizing that there is some value there, certainly, especially with the aggregation of hotels and other parts of travel, because flights only are one component of it, and we definitely don't have the core competency to get into the other aspects of travel. So there's definitely a role there, and I think our investment in Expedia is, bears testament to that.
Well, Osman Ray, you've come a long way in a very short period of time. I'm sure you'll continue to shine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.